The Arizona desert stretched endlessly beneath a molten sunrise, painted in red-gold hues that shimmered against the horizon like liquid fire. A dusty wind moved lazily across the cracked earth, whispering through brittle grass and abandoned fence posts. Amid the silence stood a lone white horse, tethered loosely near a half-collapsed barn, its mane lifting in the hot wind, as if searching for a sound only it could hear. The creature's wide, glassy eyes reflected the emptiness around it, and the faint, rhythmic tremor that began pulsing to the ground beneath its hooves. Far off, a convoy of armored rescue vehicles carved a trail through the desert highway. Their matte black frames bore the emblem of the U.S. Wildlife Hazard Response Unit, an agency born out of disaster, part military, part scientific, all necessity. Inside the lead vehicle sat Dr. Emily Ward, her hair pulled tight, the glare of the morning sun catching the edges of her bio-visor. Once a biologist who tracked endangered species, she had become the government's reluctant expert on mutations, the unpredictable, terrifying consequences of a chemical leak that had seeped into the local. Emily's eyes were fixed on the movement scanner flickering in her lap. "Seismic activity," she murmured, her voice steady but low. "Non-geological origin. 2 miles ahead." Lieutenant Grant Hollis, the team's tactical commander, gripped the steering column. "So we're doing this again," he muttered. "Not again," Emily said. "This is worse." The desert unfolded into view, an abandoned property surrounded by wilted cacti and rusted farming machinery. At its center, the white horse stamped nervously, its breath visible in the dry air. Hollis slowed the vehicle. "You sure about that reading? That thing looks harmless." Emily didn't answer immediately. The data on her screen showed deep, rhythmic pulses, something alive, something massive, moving beneath the soil. "I'm sure," she finally said. "It's right under us." They disembarked quickly. The team, 6 in total, moved like clockwork, unloading scanning drones and portable containment emitters. The air had that charged stillness that precedes a storm, though there wasn't a cloud in the sky. Emily approached the horse carefully, one gloved hand extended. The animal's muscles quivered beneath its white coat, every instinct screaming to flee. "Easy," she whispered. "You're not alone anymore." Behind her, one of the officers called out, "Dr. Ward, seismic levels rising fast." "How fast?" "Too fast." The ground trembled, not like an earthquake, more like a heartbeat, deep and wrong. Cracks spiderweb through sand. The horse neighed, eyes rolling in panic. Emily turned, scanning the horizon, and then the earth erupted. A geyser of sand shot 30 feet into the air. From it emerged something that defied biology, a massive, glistening body, armored in plates of iridescent green, each one pulsating as though alive. A giant caterpillar-like creature, its head studded with clusters of black eyes that gleamed with unnatural intelligence. The smell hit them first, a stench of acid and decay, followed by the shrill hum of its breathing, a sound that scraped the air raw. The rescue team scattered instinctively, some diving behind the vehicles, others drawing tranquilizer rifles. Emily stayed frozen for a heartbeat, transfixed by the horror of it, a living product of human negligence. Dumped after the spill, local insects absorbing the residue, something in their DNA twisting, multiplying, surviving. "Dr. Ward, move!" Hollis shouted. She stumbled back just as the creature's segmented body slammed against the ground, shaking the barn to splinters. The horse screamed, rearing as sand and debris rained down. Emily hit her comms. "Base command, this is Delta 1. Visual confirmation, hostile organism approximately 30 meters long. Engaging non-lethal measures." "Copy that," came the reply through static. "Maintain containment perimeter. Do not let it breach open terrain." The team fired, tranquilizers thudding harmlessly against the creature's armor. It barely reacted, only twisting its grotesque head toward the horse. The eyes blinked, and for an instant, Emily thought she saw recognition, as if it sensed movement, fear, life. The monster lunged. Emily ran before she realized she was moving, vaulting over a fallen beam. Dust scorched her throat as she reached the horse, pulling hard on its reins. "Come on," she shouted. The creature's massive mandible struck where she had been seconds earlier, splintering wood and earth in an explosion of dirt. The animal bolted, and she stumbled after it, coughing half-blind. Behind her, Hollis barked orders, calling for drones to deploy containment arcs. The emitters flared blue, throwing a net of light across the sand. For a second, the creature recoiled, shrieking as it burned, then rammed through, scattering the drones like toys. Emily felt the heat of its breath as it loomed above her, its body blotting out the sun. She grabbed a tranquilizer gun that had fallen nearby, aimed at one of its exposed joints, and fired. The dart hissed into flesh, drawing a gout of steaming green fluid. The bug recoiled, its screech echoing across the valley. Hollis and two others fired simultaneously, pushing it back toward the crater it had made. The air smelled of acid and ozone. When the creature finally withdrew beneath the earth, the silence that followed felt unnatural. Dust hung in the air like fog. The horse shivered beside Emily, sides heaving, eyes wild. She pressed a hand to its neck, whispering, "It's over, it's over." But deep down, she knew it wasn't. Her scanner still flickered. The seismic signal hadn't vanished. It had multiplied. There were two more readings now, moving in parallel beneath the surface, heading east toward populated territory. Emily lifted her gaze toward the horizon. The morning sun had vanished behind a pall of rising dust. In that heavy, suffocating stillness, she realized that what they had just faced wasn't an isolated incident. It was the beginning of something much larger, something the country wasn't ready for. She turned to Hollis. "We need to follow it," she said. He stared at her, pale beneath his visor. "Follow that thing?" "Yes," Emily replied quietly, glancing back at the trembling horse. "Because if we don't stop it now, there won't be anything left to rescue next time." The convoy crawled forward through the desert twilight, their headlights slicing narrow tunnels through the rising dust. The air smelled faintly of scorched soil and metal. Inside the lead vehicle, Dr. Emily Ward leaned over the seismic tracker, watching its readings pulse faster and deeper beneath the earth. Every few seconds, one of the digital lines jumped, then split, then vanished. Whatever the creature was, it wasn't alone anymore. The team had fallen silent since the encounter. The memory of the creature's shriek still lingered like an echo behind their ribs. Hollis drove with both hands clenched on the wheel, eyes never leaving the horizon. "You think that thing's heading toward the testing range?" he asked finally, his voice hoarse. Emily didn't look up. "Not heading, drawn. The chemical contamination that created it likely originated there." "You're saying this is our fault?" She hesitated. "Not ours, but someone's." They passed a broken road sign half buried in sand. U.S. military property. Restricted zone. Beyond it lay a sprawling expanse of silence. Abandoned hangars dotted the landscape, half swallowed by dunes. The place looked forgotten, but the heat from the asphalt suggested buried energy, humming generators still alive somewhere below. The convoy halted near a cracked tarmac strip. The team disembarked, setting up floodlights that painted everything in cold white. The desert wind had died. Even the insects were quiet now. Emily stepped toward a rusted fence, kneeling beside a patch of disturbed ground. The soil shimmered faintly, as if laced with glass. She ran a gloved finger through and frowned. Chemical residue, thick and oily, with a faint bioluminescent glow. Hollis joined her. "Looks like radiation." "Not radiation," Emily said softly. "Bioactive compounds. The same material we used in Project Helix." He stared at her. "Helix? The gene mapping experiment they shut down last year." She nodded grimly. The government was testing synthetic growth enzymes here. Formulas meant to accelerate regeneration in livestock. If the leak reached the local insect population, it mutated them. Not just mutated. Emily corrected. Evolved them too fast, too far. Before Hollis could respond, the ground beneath their boots trembled again, faint, rhythmic, deliberate. The team froze. The vibrations weren't moving away anymore. They were circling. Positions. Hollis barked, raising his rifle. Drones lifted off automatically, bathing the terrain in shifting beams of light. Emily moved toward the sensors. trying to stabilize the signal. "It's burrowing under the old fuel silos," she said. "Depth 40 meters. Can we contain it?" "Not with tranquilizers. We need to cut off its oxygen flow. The tunnels it's creating, they're venting gases upward." As she spoke, one of the drones flickered, then went dead. A moment later, the ground near the old hangar cracked open. Heat burst from the fissure like a furnace blast. Then came a second creature, slightly smaller but faster, dragging its segmented body across the tarmac with terrifying purpose. Its exoskeleton was darker, coated in a viscous sheen of sludge that smoked where it touched the air. The rescue team scattered, but this time Emily didn't retreat. She grabbed a sensor pack and sprinted toward the hangar doors. The metal creaked as she pushed them open. Inside, the air was heavy with dust and silence. Her flashlight beam caught a row of chemical barrels stacked against the far wall, their hazard labels half-faded. "BL Growth Catalyst, property of Helix Corp." She exhaled sharply. "I knew it." Behind her, the muffled shouts of the team turned into chaos. Hollis's voice crackled through the comms. "Emily, it's breaching the perimeter. Get clear." She ignored him. Her eyes were locked on a control terminal buried beneath debris. If she could access the storage network, she might trace where the enzymes were released. Kneeling, she wiped away sand from the console and powered it up. The monitor flickered, then hummed to life, displaying rows of corrupted data and archived video logs. The latest recording showed lab technicians in hazmat suits conducting experiments on insect larvae. One of the scientists, younger, nervous, turned toward the camera. "Subject 17 showing exponential growth. Enzyme exposure ratio exceeds safe threshold. Requesting immediate containment." The video ended with static. Emily's heart sank. They hadn't stopped it. They had buried it, literally. A deafening crash tore through the hangar. The smaller bug slammed into the structure, denting the metal wall inward. Emily grabbed the data drive, shoving it into her vest pocket, and ran. The creature burst through the wall in a shower of steel and dust. Its body glistened like molten tar, every movement producing a low, guttural vibration. Hollis's voice roared through the radio. "Ward, where are you?" "Coming out now," she gasped, sprinting across the floor. Outside, the rest of the team had deployed containment pylons in a half-circle around the hangar. Electric arcs flared between them, forming a crackling barrier of blue light. "We got 60 seconds before this overloads," one of the technicians yelled. Emily dove through the gap as the creature lunged behind her, colliding with the containment field. It convulsed violently, its body rippling with heat. For a brief moment, its dark shell glowed from within, revealing bones and organs that should never have existed. Then it collapsed, steaming, the stench unbearable. The silence afterward felt absolute. The pylons hissed and died. The desert wind returned, slow and indifferent. Emily fell to her knees, clutching the drive to her chest. Hollis knelt beside her, his visor cracked, sweat running down his temples. What the hell was that thing? She stared at the smoking carcass. "An accident," she whispered. "And if the data is right, there are more." The horse, still tethered near the convoy, whinnied softly. It pawed the ground and looked toward the horizon, where faint plumes of dust twisted against the dying sun. Emily followed its gaze and saw it. A ripple under the earth, moving fast, heading toward the nearest human settlement. Her chest tightened. "They're migrating," she said, toward the town. Hollis's face paled. "Then we move now." Emily rose slowly, eyes still fixed on the horizon. "No," she said. "We warn them first. Then we burn everything they left behind." The desert swallowed her words. Above them, the first stars appeared, cold, silent witnesses to the mistake humanity had made. Then, as if the night had been holding its breath all along, something shifted. The ground to periphery trembled, subtle first, then growing into a rhythm like distant drums. The sensors, newly planted along the dirt road, pinged and flickered. "They're here," Hollis said without turning, his voice flat. On the horizon, something crawled, a slow impossibility. Silhouettes slithered under moonlight, large and bulbous, moving with a creeping intent toward the cluster of houses. Their bodies caught the light and shimmered, like oil slicks sliding over scale and chitin. Panic ricocheted along the barricades. Lights flared as men and women poured into the streets with flashlights and bottles of water, standing like human shields between their homes and the dark. Emily felt the familiar surge of adrenaline sweeten the air, but she kept her mind centered on the tactical map in her hand. They deployed the perimeter teams, but the reality was ugly and immediate. These creatures could bypass barricades by tunneling beneath them. They could steam through fences and tear down the thin scaffolding of human preparation. The team's traps, lines of incendiary gel and electric pylons, offered fragile hope. If multiple targets could be herded into a kill corridor, a coordinated strike might halt their rush. The first attack came without the screaming spectacle some had imagined. It was merciless in its methodicalness. One creature burst from the cracked asphalt of Main Street, lifting the hood of a parked car like a child uncovering a toy. It eased itself into the space between diners and hardware stores, its jaws working with terrible patience. The municipal generator exploded in a dull, rolling sound as the creature's acid-slick body met the metal. Then a smaller form erupted behind it, followed by another. They moved in waves, not wild but purposeful, as if a greater instinct guided their direction. The town's lights dimmed and flickered, but the people held. Rosa worked in the gym, stabilizing a neighbor whose wife had fainted. An elderly man in the corner, Mr. Harlan, who had run the barber shop for decades, crossed himself and muttered something about sins repaid. Emily found herself beside Hollis at the edge of the cordon. The town's faces behind them a crowd of fragile hopes. "We have one chance," she whispered. "We lure them past the diner, into the kill corridor near the old feed store. You trigger the pylons. I'll ignite the gel." He blinked once, and she could see it. The calculus of risk, the human ledger of lives versus mission. He nodded, under a moon that made everything crystalline. They executed the plan. The rescue team drove a battered pickup laden with meat and scent lures, crude bait designed to draw the creature's attention away from the evacuees. The convoy threaded the narrow streets, engines grumbling, while the townspeople watched from shadow porches. Emily rode in the back, heart thudding against her ribs, the horse's flank warm at her side. The creatures followed, long and hungry, their multiple eyes glinting like a malign constellation. They obeyed the plight of smell and motion, diverting away from homes and toward the trap. When the last was in position, Hollis's fingers tightened around the pylon control. Emily's hands found the gel canister, her breath even. For a brittle, perfect second, time seemed to condense into a crystal. She thought of the horse in the stall, of the hangar footage, of the lab technicians unable to stop what they'd unleashed. She thought of the town's children and the old man at the barber's window. Then she triggered the release. A wall of heat jumped the kill corridor, and the creatures howled, not in sound so much as in the noise of collapsing intent. They writhed and burned and thudded into the electric pylons. For a moment, the night was a chaos of flaring light and steam, and then it went silent again, the stillness settling like a temporary benediction. The town breathed as one organism, exhaling in a wash of exhausted relief. Emily's knees trembled, but she forced herself to stand. They had bought the town the night, perhaps more. But as she looked across the street at the blackened, smoking remains of what had been a diner's neon sign, she felt a hollow place open in her chest. Temporary victories could not erase the origin of the plague, nor the knowledge that more swarms were on the move. In the dim afterglow, a child's small hand found its mother's fingers, and Emily understood more sharply than ever that this fight would stretch beyond this night, beyond this town. That it had already become bigger than they had imagined. They rolled into the town as dusk smeared itself across the sky, the convoy's headlights cutting pale crescents into the low houses and shuttered storefronts. The place looked sleepy from a highway, a scatter of neon and porch lights framed by sagging power lines. But when the rescue team entered, conversation died and doors cracked open. Faces peered out. Farmers with dirt still under their nails, teenagers in grease-stained shirts, an old diner server wiping her hands on a towel and staring like she'd seen a ghost. Emily felt that familiar, bitter tug in her chest, the uncanny intimacy of small towns, where everyone knows one another, and the loss of one life ripples like a stone dropped in still water. They established their command in the town's community center, a squat brick building that smelled faintly of bleach and coffee. Floodlights were angled into the parking lot, and makeshift barricades formed a ring around the perimeter. Emily moved through the room like a conductor, quiet but focused. She handed out tablets and maps, pointing to lines on a screen where seismic data from the last hours glowed in jagged pulses. "They're migrating east," she told the assembled local officials. 3 clusters moving across the county. If we don't intercept them, they'll reach the residential districts before dawn. A man in a press suit, the town mayor, cleared his throat. His voice was thin and careful. "You expect us to evacuate at night? Our livestock, the families. You can't just ask people to leave their homes on your word." His eyes searched Emily's face for a human plea she had no right to give. There has to be proof. Emily understood the calculus of disbelief. People protect what they can see. They ignore what reads as rumor until it bites them. She looked at the room, at mothers with children clinging to their skirts, and an old schoolteacher whose hands had once taught letters and now trembled at the thought of an insect the size of a truck. She felt the weight of every life in that building settle onto her shoulders. "I don't expect you to trust me," she said slowly, choosing each syllable like a scalpel. "I expect you to trust the evidence." She tapped the tablet, and the screen filled with looped footage. The hangar breach, the creatures bursting from sand, sensors spiking. The mayor's jaw tightened. A hush fell. For a heartbeat, the town believed. They moved with an efficiency that belied the chaos. Volunteers ferried families to the high school gym. Local radio towers transmitted emergency messages, and school buses idled, engines humming. Hollis organized teams to patrol the perimeter, while technicians bolted sensors and temporarily jury-rigged barriers powered by the town generator. A volunteer medic came forward, an earnest woman named Rosa, with a braid wound tight at the nape of her neck, and Emily took a breath and explained what she could. The creature's tendency to burrow, the catalytic compounds that fed them, and the slim chance that heat and containment might slow their advance. She didn't say the part that hollowed her out inside. That containment might only by minutes not guarantee safety. As night settled fully, the town sky darkened into a velvet, so complete the stars were sharp as pins. From the outskirts came the hum of distant engines and the occasional bark of a dog. Emily stood outside the community center for a moment, watching the orange halo of the town's lamps, the silhouettes of people moving in hurried clusters. She felt the horse's warm breath press against her hand when she'd led it into a makeshift stall behind the gym earlier. The animal had calmed in the presence of human voices and food. It nickered softly now, a thin, fragile sound in the heavy air.